Welcome to Marathon Champions, the podcast where running legends Benji Durden, Bill Rodgers, and Ron Tabb share their timeless wisdom on marathon training and inspire listeners with their wealth of experience. These champions continue to impact the running world today.
Let me introduce our guest here, Dick Beardsley. He's the fastest of the four of us here.
You're looking good, Benji.
Hanging in here.
Yeah, good for you.
How's the knee?
Well, I can't hardly bend it, but it's been 3 months. I've been in a cast and, 2 different surgeries, so I go to PT, so we'll see that. But the doc, he said even under anesthesia, he couldn't get it to bend more than 90 degrees because of all the
scar tissue.
Yeah, and it's just been so through the ringer. But at 90 degrees, he said, I'll be able to function normally at 90, but now I don't know if I can even get 10%.
Well, yeah, but you got to work back. So how many surgeries is this now for you?
On that left one, well, before they took the old stuff out 2 months ago, I had, in the past year, I had 9. I know.
How many knee replacements have you had?
This is my 3rd one now.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
But Benji, my right one, that was put in 2009, and that has never given me any trouble. I can bend it like a normal knee, but this left one, that's the one I got messed up in the farm accident way back when.
Yeah, so you've had other injuries to add to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, but at least it's. But I tell you, for being where I couldn't use that leg for 3 months. It's like skin wrapped around a bone. There's no muscle there right now, hardly.
Yeah, I can see how that would be the case. Yeah,
but that'll build back up. It just takes time.
Yeah, you'll go out and fish a lot and fix it.
Oh yeah, there you go.
So Dick, you looked. I went and looked at some of your race history, and you didn't really run much that was considered fast, other than the marathon.
No.
It's not race shorter races that often?
No, my PR in like 10K, Benji, was that heart race in Atlanta a few weeks before Boston. I think I ran 29:12 there. And remember, that was a pretty hilly course.
Oh, yeah, that was a tough course. 29
was
a good time on that one.
But I was tickled with that. But I don't know, there was something about, when I could run like in the 450s, it seemed like all day long. But when I had to run into the 430s or something like that for a 10K, I don't know. It just didn't work out for me very well.
Well, what were you? I mean, that was Coach Squires having you do stuff that really didn't help for shorter races, or you were working with him, right?
I worked with him quite a bit, and it was most of my training was basically all geared towards marathoning, and I knew I didn't have a lot of speed, and so I ran right around 48 minutes or so for 10 miles, and nothing like how you ran, and Bill and Ron, but I don't know, there was something about the marathon that just kind of attached itself to me, and I guess that was a good thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't argue with success.
Well, I still remember back that when I ran my first Houston marathon in 81, and Bill and I kind of broke away, and it was about 19 miles or so. Bill had to take a dump, so he ran across this field into the woods, and I kept going. Well, he eventually caught up to me, and then he ended up beating me. And then when you and I kind of broke away, remember how windy it was?
Yeah,
we took turns for a little bit, and then with a mile to go, it was kind of anybody's race, and you just blew me away at the last mile.
Well, actually, you dropped off the pace with me around 30K, actually.
Was that what it was?
Yeah, we kept taking turns, like every 2 minutes we'd watching the clock, and every 2 minutes one of us would change, and you just didn't come up for your turn, and I just kept going.
Well, maybe that was such a long time ago. But back then, I living here in northern Minnesota, I did maybe a little bit of fartlek once a week if I could find some dry pavement. So I was strong for the most part, but I really didn't have much speed, and that's probably what it was. You probably I couldn't take my turn, and that's what you were supposed to do. What the heck? I ain't waiting for Beardsley.
Yeah. Well, it was, we had raced each other a couple weeks earlier at Savannah in the half.
Yes, at the half marathon, and you did the same thing to me.
Well, the thing there is, we were running into the wind, and I was trying every time I tried to come up and take my turn into the wind, you picked up the pace. And then about 11 miles, you looked over your shoulder, not at me, but back to see where Gordon Minty was. And I said, well, I should go.
And you did. Yeah, because you ran 103 and change, and I ran 103 and some maybe 30
like
seconds
103,
back.
38 or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. But I remember
I was
that.
103.11.
Yeah,
Back when that was a fast time.
right. Now, wasn't that on like an army base or something?
Yeah, it was a military base, army base.
Yeah, it was flat as a pancake. If
Oh
I
yeah, it was a
remember
good course if the weather was right. That day was
Right.
kind of a tough day.
It was, yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. But good memories.
Dick, it's Bill here. I just wanted to say something that I think is unique about your marathoning. You're different from me and Ron and Benji and almost more than any other marathoner I know. And that is that I know you ran a marathon in college and that you increased the quality of your marathon steadily over about 6 or 7 or 8 years.
Well, actually, let's see, Bill. So I ran my first one in 1977. I was 21. It was the Pavo Nurmi Marathon, it's still around to this day. It's one of the oldest marathons in the upper Midwest over in a little town called Hurley, Wisconsin. And I ran 2:47 there. And then it wasn't like I tried to run each race faster than the one before. It just happened to work out that way. And that streak finally came to an end after I ran the 2:09:36 at Grandma's in 1981. So yeah, about a 4-year period there. I was fortunate each marathon I ran got, just a little bit quicker than the one before. I sure wasn't trying to do it like that. It just happened to work out that way.
Do you think maybe it's a circumstance of the very challenging weather in Minnesota? And
yeah, that's a good question, Bill. I don't know. I went into those early years of my marathoning. I went into each race with the idea of just trying to run my best. And I remember I so wanted, when I got down into I qualified for the Olympic trials in 1980 at the very first Manitoba International Marathon in Winnipeg, which isn't too far from where I live. And back then in 1980, you had to qualify with a time of 2:21:56, and I ran 2:21:54. So I was tickled pink because I PR'd by about a minute or by about 10 minutes that day. And so then I got real sick during the winter of 1980 and finally got diagnosed with anemia, real bad anemia, and they got me on some iron supplements. And so I went into the 1980 Olympic trials with just thinking, you know what, this is it. This will be my swan song. I'll be able to tell my kids and grandkids I ran in the Olympic trials. And I was all set. That was going to be it. And then I had a big breakthrough that day. And it was the first time I'd ever broken 2:20. I ran 2:16:01. And I remember I was halfway through the finish chute and I'm thinking, I'm not quitting now. So if I would have run like another 2:21 or 2:20, I probably would have hung it up, but things work out for a reason, I guess.
do you think also, in Minnesota, it's a unique state with a success rate of high level distance runners, in particular the Kleckers,
Yes.
and their son who's doing so well these days.
Well, yeah, and you look at like Ron Dawes and Gary Bjorklund and Buddy Edelin, way back when he had the world record holder at one time. He's a Minnesotan. So I think there's something about, our winters are brutal, and where I live in northern Minnesota, there were many mornings I'd be out running, and I'm not kidding you. It would be minus 40 degrees actual temperature. The coldest I ever ran, I lived in a cabin along this wild river out in the middle of the bush. And I got up that morning to go for a run, and I had a thermometer that was outside my kitchen window, and I looked at it, and it was pegged out at minus 60. And so my wife at the time, Mary, she said, "You're not going out for a run." I go, "Man," I said, "I'm going to go do like a 3 mile run." I said, "If I'm not back within a half an hour," I said, "come looking for me. Otherwise, I'm going to freeze up like a gosh dang fossil." So I put on all my gear and there was not an ounce of wind and it was cold, but once I got going, it really wasn't that bad. So I think there is something about that. I don't know if it's that toughness that it builds in runners from our state or what, but if and I wasn't, I lived and trained and lived here all my life, loved Minnesota to death, and I wasn't about to go anywhere to train.
Well, you
And
came down to
so
Atlanta a couple times.
one time I did. In fact, Benji, I'm just going to bring that up. So after it was that early February of 1982 when it was pegged out at -60, and I knew if I had any shot at all, I had to get somewhere. Not so much. Well, getting out of the cold would definitely help, but where I live, there's not a lot of hills, and I knew Coach Squires contacted the Atlanta Track Club, and Ben, do you remember a guy named Mike Dempirio?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he was a member there. He wasn't a great runner or anything, but he was a bachelor at the time. And Coach Squires contacted the Atlanta Track Club and said, "Hey, is there anybody that could put Dick up for a couple of months?" And Mike said, "Hey, I'll volunteer." And we became really good friends. And so I was down there for about 2.5 months. And just down from where Mike's condo was an apartment complex. And I was out running one day, and next thing I know, this guy comes up behind me and introduces himself, and it was Dean Matthews. And Dean was a heck of a runner. So
Well, yeah.
we did, I was used to training all by myself all the time, but Dean and I hooked up, probably 3 times a week at least. And I think that really benefited me being down there on the hills and having Dean to train with too. And then I'd run into you, Benji, once in a while, and Lee, your buddy Lee Fiddler, wasn't his name?
Yeah, Lee
Yeah.
Fiddler, he's still down there.
Is he? I'll be darned.
So, Dick, did you go to Atlanta because Squires was trying to get you ready for Boston? You got to get ready. If there's heat down there, there's hills in Atlanta, of course. Is that what you're saying? And then teaming up with someone who could really push you. Had you not had someone who could really push you before in your training?
That is why the reason I went down to Atlanta, because Coach Squire said we need to get you on the hills. And as Benji can attest, in Atlanta, at least where I was living with Mike Imperio, you're either going up a hill or down a hill, it seemed like.
If
And
you're in Atlanta, you're going up a hill or down a hill.
yeah, but it was up to that point. I basically always trained by myself, so I was able to run 209 off of that. But having Dean down there, especially for I didn't do a lot of track workouts, but about once a week, Coach would send me to the track. So Dean and I always did that together, and we did about one day of fartlek together, and then we would do a lot of our real long runs together. And as you know, Billy, Coach Squires, that long run was something that at least for me, he in that long run, it wasn't just getting out and doing your 20-miler. He would incorporate everything we'd done the previous 6 days into that one run, and so it really made it go by quick. And having Dean there really was incredibly helpful.
Dick, did you ever push beyond 20 miles, like a 23-mile or maybe one 25-miler?
Yeah, most of my runs every Sunday were somewhere between 22 to 24 miles. And then once a year, I would do a 30-miler. And I don't know, Coach wasn't real excited about that, but I don't know why. I think I read somewhere that, maybe it was Jeff Galloway or something that, you got to do, you got to go beyond it. Maybe that's who it was. And you got to go beyond the distance. So I would do a 130-miler a year, but I quit doing that because I kept pushing it back and back and back. And about 3 years in a row, I was doing it on December 31st just to get it in. So, but most weeks were 22 to 24 miles.
Benji and Ron, what is your response to that? Doing a 30-miler, every year. I think Kenny Moore started that,
Kenny, he had a special approach to basically Bowerman, was his coach. He
Right?
could he could do a really hard day, and then he had to take two easy days essentially. And an easy day for Kenny was 3 miles or less, sometimes even like 2 miles. And that was just what made him work. I mean, there's enough individual variation that I would get in 30-mile days. I'd do like a 22, 23-mile morning, and then like a 8 to 10 mile evening run. So I don't think I ever ran more than about 25 miles in a single run during my prime. I've since done things like that, but that's just what I could do.
Yeah, I was doing when I was training with Alberto. Uh, Occasionally, we would go out for a 20-mile run, but that was pretty much as far as I would go. I would have like you, Benji. I would have that 23, 24-mile day, but 30-mile runs. I never did anything like that. Um, but my miles. We've talked about this in the past, Dick. I would do what my favorite Sunday workout was. I do a really hard 17 in the morning, and it was in the middle I'd be running sub fives. So rolling into it, getting into 10 of the miles under 50 minutes. And then later in the afternoon, I'd go out for a 5 or 6 mile easy shakeout run.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so that I would get my 20 plus miles on the weekend, but typically we do intervals on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then the in between days I do probably like you guys doing doubles. Morning run, afternoon run, usually 8 to 10 in the morning, 8 to 10 in the afternoon. So I was averaging about 120 a week.
So Benji, Dick, Ron, we all kind of train pretty much the same, I think.
Not
Yeah.
really, not really, because I was sub 100 most of the time. I would be 85 to 95. I'd have 3 good days and then 4 6-mile days.
Yeah, but then Benji, you were wearing rubber suits in the middle of
Yeah,
summer
yeah.
in
But
Atlanta.
I did the more traditional training before I did the heat training, and I didn't run but about 236. And it's when I backed off and did more, focused days and more recovery days is when I succeeded. Everybody's a little different.
Yeah.
For me to try to run I did 140 miles for a bit just to see what it was like. And I was okay at shorter races, but I was flat. When I ran longer races, that flatness showed up.
Yeah, I think you're right, Benji. I mean, I would get up, I would take November pretty easy. Then December, January, those 2 months I'd probably average about 140 miles a week. But it was just, again, you're up here in the middle of the North Country, North Woods, and you couldn't do a lot of fast stuff. So I was just out getting strong. And then as the weather started to improve, as we got into March and April, I would drop it down to maybe 120, and then I could increase the intensity a little bit. So I guess everybody, does it a little bit different, kind of depending on their situation. And for me, sometimes I think I look back, and it's so easy to look back. I wish I would have taken it easier on my easy days. I thought if I wasn't out the door at, under 6-minute pace on an easy day, I was wasting my time. And I look back on that now, and that recovery period is such an important part of training, don't you think?
Oh yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, that's where I made some huge mistakes. I didn't take enough easy days. I'm like you, Dick.
Yeah.
I didn't believe. I thought you were wasting your time if you went under 6 minutes.
Right.
And I was able to handle that, and now in retrospect, I'm going probably should have backed off a lot of those miles because that's just a lot of hard miles. I have a question for you, Dick. How many the 10 weeks, 12 weeks leading up to Boston when you ran your 208? Do you know what your mileage was on average for the week?
Yeah, it was about 120, probably something like in that neighborhood, about
Okay,
120 miles a week. And
Yeah.
then, the worst part of marathon training for me was the taper week. I was like a caged tiger. And I remember, I would do like 70 miles for a taper week, but when you're coming off of 120 or 130, that for my body, that felt like I was like not even
It felt
hardly
weird.
It felt weird. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I look
I
back
agree.
on that and maybe I should have tapered even more. It's easy to look back, but at the time, that's the way I did things.
I would have a tough time saying you should have done less. I mean, you were successful, and
Yeah.
who knows if we had the opportunity to do, something, 20 times, we
Right.
could figure out which one was the proper one, but you were successful that one time, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
So,
No.
so Benji, when you ran your 209 at Boston, what did you what do you think your average was for the 10 weeks, 12 weeks leading up to Boston? And I have the same question for you, Bill. When you set the American record, uh, what do you think your miles, what were you averaging the 10 to 12 weeks before Boston?
Well, I was probably about 90, 95, something like that.
Okay.
Again, because if you're doing 24 miles in 4 days, you're not going to get 120 by doing 3 days. That's just
Right.
crazy.
Yeah.
Um, and I also raced quite a bit during that period, except
We all
really,
did.
yeah.
Yeah.
But the racing for the most part was speed work.
Right.
It was
I did
workout.
intervals
I mean,
one
it was,
day, long run one day, and speed work one day, and so
Yep.
that was it. That's all we had time for.
I think we all, if you're, Dick and I are coming from, I think, a colder climate, Ron and Benji, than what you were doing at the time. So yes, Mother Nature controlled us a lot. But I
Well,
think
Atlanta,
also,
we had nasty winters, not as much cold, but it'd be wet and it'd be icy, and so we were also being controlled in Atlanta by the winter.
well, did any, um, Benji, Ron, and Dick, could you have access to an indoor track? I did at Tufts University, Boston College. Of course, we all got kicked off a lot of them. Runners were persona non grata, but
Well, at the time I was running, indoor tracks were something they put up and took down. It'd be like a 10
Oh,
to
sure.
12 lap track on, the wood. And so, no, there was no place. If I couldn't get out and run, I occasionally ran in the pool, but that was rare. I remember it was just, I put on spikes a couple times. I did this the weekend before that Houston Marathon where Dick and I, went with each other
Yeah.
back and forth. I ran 16 miles in spikes because it was an icy road.
oh my God.
whoa.
Well,
I can,
I wanted to get in
Right.
my depletion run. I did a depletion run on Sundays before the week of the week of the marathon.
Benji, why didn't you go up to Minnesota and run with Dick and when the feet were cold?
I had a wife who was a school teacher who wasn't that thrilled with what I was doing in the running world as it was.
Yeah, I had no indoor track close by when I was in college. I went to a little small agricultural college, part of the University of Minnesota, and we didn't have an indoor track there. In fact, our outdoor track was a cinder one, but because it was an agricultural college, we had a big livestock barn, and so we would, if it was super, super bad, what the heck?
You're there.
Oh,
Hello?
sorry, my phone was ringing. If it was super bad outside, we would shovel a little kind of a circle in this big old livestock barn, and we'd run in there. I did that one time. I thought, it smelled like horse manure in there and stuff. I thought, there's no weather that's worse than running in this thing. So after that, I just always ran outside.
Well, Dick, can you hear me, Dick?
Yeah.
Dick, do you think, I think you're from Minnesota, fishing, outdoor life, skiing, snowshoeing, this is part of Minnesota.
Absolutely.
So you could kind of relax. This is how I look at it, that you could have this part of your life where you could relax, you're in your boat, your canoe, whatever, and you're fishing. Do you think that played a huge role in your life? You're a professional fisherman. You went on to that. And so do you think you were a fisherman first, and then you
Right.
became a runner, right?
Oh yeah, it's funny, the people 40 some years ago, they look at me as Dick Beardsley the runner, but all the kids when I got done with all that, they weren't even a thought in their parents' mind. They all associated, oh, Dick the fisherman. They had no idea about my running background and stuff. So no, I was very fortunate, growing up here in Minnesota. My dad was a very big into the outdoors, especially fishing. And my dad started taking me out with him when I was, 2 years old. And he said I never complained. And if I got a little tired, they'd throw a cushion up into the front of the boat and I'd sleep a little bit and then wake up and start fishing. And it was just something I really fell in love with from an early age. And, I started my own fishing guide business when I was 12 years old, and I've been doing it ever since. And I absolutely love the outdoors. And you're right, Bill. It's something that, like a lot of times when I get done with my second training run in the day, and I'd go out for, I'd put the boat in and go out. It was just very relaxing, and it was kind of, it got my mind off of just thinking about running all the time, which believe me, that was the forefront of my brain at the time. But still, it was nice to be able to kind of get away from it and do something that I loved even a little bit more than running.